Story 1. The whole family has used emails for years. The other day, I had to send one for my dad, and he said, "Send both files in one email, so you don't have to pay twice." Story 2. My mom was trying to move about 200 pictures from one folder to another. Her approach was to open one picture, use Save As to save it to the other folder, and then delete the original one by one. When I tried to explain that she could click and drag the whole thing over in 2 seconds, she said that wouldn't be any faster than the way she was doing it. She would also save pictures she found online by copying them, opening a word processing application, pasting them there, and saving the document as a .docs file. Additionally, she would try to open JPEG files by right-clicking on them, selecting Open With, and choosing the word processing application. Story 3. I was once trying to teach someone how Windows File Explorer worked. For some reason, they could not grasp the concept of using folders to store documents. I had to get an actual folder and a piece of paper to demonstrate putting paper into the folder before she understood the concept. Story 4. The instructions said to close the door, but it referred to the latch on the floppy drive for the Commodore 64. My friend got up and closed the door to the room. Story 5. I was helping someone with a website for their small business. I informed them that I added an alternative text tag to some of the photos that would display text when they hovered over them, and suggested they try it out. He literally picked up his mouse and placed it on the screen. I fell on the floor and nearly laughed uncontrollably. Story 6. A middle-aged lady became frightened when she was told she needed a mouse to operate a computer. This occurred in the early 2000s. Story 7. I work in a call center, and one of my jobs is helping clients with basic computer troubleshooting. It is an interesting task trying to explain to someone who earns more than I do and has been in the same job longer than I have been alive where the start button is. Story 8. My employer hired someone to work for me in technical support. In the first few days, I had to show her how to open Outlook, create a new email, and where to put the recipient address. I had to demonstrate multiple times how to open Excel, let alone use it. She never mastered email, and eventually we concluded she could not read, which led us to let her go. This was in the early 2000s, and she was probably in her 30s at the time. Story 9. This just happened last Friday. I am a new legal secretary in a small law firm where the partners have been in business for 50 years. Part of my job is to print every email that arrives, and of course, people often send large attachments on Fridays at 4:55. I had some emails queued up to print, and since it was already 10 minutes past closing time, I asked the managing partner if he would shut down the computer after it finished printing. He did not know how to shut down the computer. Story 10. I worked for a law firm where one of the administrators would print the PDF of the case from her email. She would then scan it back to her computer because it downloaded to the documents folder so she could move it to the case folder. I told her she could just click the down arrow to download it, then move the file, saving hundreds of sheets of paper. She said that was too complicated. She only lasted a few months before she was let go. I thought of another instance. At the same law firm, a lawyer was afraid the cleaning crew would steal her laptop. So, she took her trash can, shoved it under her desk, placed her laptop in it, and covered it with paper towels. The cleaning crew, not realizing it was a laptop, emptied her trash and found it. They put it aside in the cleaning crew supervisor's office because they thought it was odd to throw away a laptop that looked brand new. Story 11. My grandfather typed "big boobs" as his Facebook status about 15 times in a 5-minute span. I think I understand what he was trying to do. Story 12. My friend won't stop deleting random files off his computer whenever he runs out of space. He said, "My game is not working." I asked, "Can you send me a screenshot?" It clearly indicated that it needed more storage to open. I suggested, "You need to clear some space. It's only around half a gigabyte. So why don't you go on Steam and uninstall a game or delete some of the old videos from your video folder?" He replied, "Okay." After waiting for around half an hour for him to join our lobby, he said, "Oh no." I asked, "What happened?" He said, "I think I deleted something important." No matter how many times I try to explain it to him, he always selects folders or files that don't look important and permanently deletes them. He deletes random programs, Windows files, and even things he created and temporarily forgot about. Story 13. Growing up in the 1990s, I remember seeing many adults yelling commands at computer screens. They did not understand standard input and output devices like keyboards and mice because their only concept of computers came from watching Star Trek. Story 14. I worked at the head office of a major UK company. They hired a woman as a website administrator, and on her first day of training, asked her to click on something. She just stared blankly, and they repeated, "Click on it with the mouse." "The what?" was her reply. They had interviewed her for the job, and it turned out that in 2004 she had somehow never used a computer that had a mouse. I don't think she made it past lunchtime. Story 15. We got my grandma a computer so she could receive emails with pictures of her grandkids. It had a sleep mode button and came with a cover for the monitor. Every night, she diligently put it to sleep and covered it, sincerely believing it needed rest and that the lights should be off. Story 16. I sold a computer on Craigslist about 10 years ago. It included a keyboard, mouse, LCD monitor, and cables. When the buyer took it home, he said it didn't work and that the screen remained blank when powered on. When he returned, I realized he was pressing the power button on the LCD monitor instead of the computer. Story 17. This was over 10 years ago. Whenever the house Wi-Fi was not working well, my roommate would unplug the Ethernet cable from the modem and the router, then hold it up and down, similar to how you would hold a hose to drain water. He believed this would allow the electrons to drain out so the internet would not be clogged. I tried to explain that this was not how Ethernet worked, but he insisted the cable technician had advised him to do this, and that ended the discussion. Interestingly, it usually worked because it reset the internet connection, just not for the reason he believed. Story 18. I volunteer as an IT support person in retirement homes. I understand that it is not their fault for not understanding computers. They did not grow up with them. It makes sense that they would not know what to do. It has been incredibly eye-opening to see how my life is so different from theirs because computers and phones have been a significant part of my life, and I know how to use them. I receive basic questions from the residents, but when I solve their problems, it feels as if I have made a monumental impact. Story 19. I have been working in information technology for almost 25 years. A few weeks ago, a user told me their second monitor was not working. I walked over and pressed the power button. Problem solved. Information technology would be a great career if it weren't for the challenging users. Story 20. A user was attempting to connect to the Wi-Fi network by following the documentation. Upon reaching the step that required credential entry, the instructions stated, "Enter your username and password in this window," accompanied by a screenshot of the login window. The user contacted the help desk, unable to enter anything into the window. Eventually, it was discovered that the user was trying to type their credentials into the screenshot itself. Story 21. I was watching a streaming channel that shows a variety of those misleading industry Learn Windows 95 in 15 minutes videotapes. If you were around back then, you would immediately recognize that little video rack at the checkout aisles of electronic stores. There were hundreds of these tapes being released every month. It was insane. Probably the worst offender was a how to use the internet video that didn't really explain anything. It just encouraged the viewer to ask the technician to do everything for them. But the worst part was the explanation on how to actually use the internet. The tape basically provides the viewer with a list of 10 websites they can visit, as if these 10 sites represent the entire 1996 internet. These weren't even good websites. One was just a horoscope blog called something like Brittany's Star Cat. But that's not even the ridiculous part. The ridiculous part is it states, for news, go to http www. And on screen, http://www. I was incredibly astonished at the brazen confidence of these creators, willing to make a video to teach computer literacy while being so poorly informed themselves that they instructed users to enter URLs with backslashes instead of slashes. I mean, I've seen people do dumber things with computers before, but this entire tape was so devoid of actual information that the only substance to it was listing these example websites in a pre-Ask Jeeves world. They had one job, These individuals had one job and failed at such a core level that it would immediately confuse anyone who followed their instructions. And worst of all, they embraced their fundamental incompetence with unwavering certainty, documented it for widely released video, and charged us $19.99 to witness the glory of a 404 error screen. Story 22. My sister places every file she creates on the desktop. She does not understand folders. She cannot move a window around on the screen, nor can she resize a window except using the minimize and restore buttons in the upper right corner. She does not realize that when she is using Google and wants to switch to a different search, she does not need to close and reopen Google, but can simply use tabs. Story 23. I am a graphic designer, and it's routine for me to receive emails containing photos taken with a phone of a web page displayed on the customer's laptop or desktop monitor. Many customers are unaware of the various methods to take a screenshot or copy a URL. Some are even unable to send an email from a desktop operating system. As a late member of Generation X, I find it perplexing that people younger than me often struggle with tasks that are not performed on a mobile device. Bonus: if you claim to be a graphic designer, please understand that you cannot make a 300 by 250 graphic higher resolution. Kindly refrain from sending me 1250 by 1042 JPEGs. Story 24. Oh goodness, so many stories. As a college student, I had a computer that wouldn't boot. I showed up to find over a dozen refrigerator magnets stuck to the outside of the case. There was also the professor trying to upgrade Windows 3.1 via floppy disk. I forget how many disks it took. His PC didn't have a CD drive, but it was a lot on his 386 that he refused to replace or upgrade. Recently, we had a new hire, a 19-year-old in 2023, that we had to explain what a start button on Windows was, how and where file-save was, and what it meant. Kids who have only been exposed to phones and tablets are the bane of my existence these days. Story 25. When I worked as a field technician for a local university, I frequently fixed computers for professors and administrators. My favorite was an administrator who needed only a new monitor. She insisted that I return all her icons to their original positions after replacing it. Story 26. Last year, a new employee with a computer science degree stated that they did not know how to use Microsoft Word and wanted to do everything with Adobe software instead. Since this is a government agency, redoing all the systems to accommodate one person was not feasible. Story 27. During a late 1990s computer training session at my job, I was in a room full of older employees who had apparently never even seen a computer before, much less used one. When the instructor asked us to click on something with the mouse, one man picked up the mouse and pointed it at the monitor like a television remote, then asked the instructor why it wasn't doing anything. Story 28. I once had someone who thought their Wi-Fi was down because their wireless mouse had run out of battery and needed replacements. I think that's my favorite. Story 29. A friend shared this story. A couple he knew bought their son a computer for his birthday back in 1998. The son had it for just over 24 hours. Why? Because the next day, the parents couldn't figure out how to turn it on. So they concluded they had been sold a defective product and took it back to the store for a refund. They received the refund because, according to my friend, the father was very confrontational and showed them who's boss. Even after being shown how to turn it on, they still insisted it was a scam and requested their money back. The son ended up with a book on football, which he dislikes, and the father kept it for himself. He received the gift but borrowed it afterwards and never returned it. Story 30. I received a call from someone because a message appeared in their spreadsheet indicating that there was missing information in column B and that all rows needed to be completed before the file could be saved. I had added this message to the master template because I was frustrated with people not completing the file properly. I patiently explained that he needed to ensure all rows in column B were completed. He asked me, "Where's column B?" "Well, Jeremy," I replied, "traditionally, column B is located between column A and column C. Additionally, someone complained that he wanted to calculate an average, but every time he clicked AutoSum, it just added all the numbers together." Story 31. My roommate got a pre-built gaming computer, and when setting it up, She spent 45 minutes getting frustrated trying to find the HDMI port her monitor plugged into, as it had a port cover on it from shipping. Took me 30 seconds to find. She argues with her boyfriend that her Discord nickname Boomer is inaccurate. I disagree. Story 32. I was working on a laptop for a new hire in the IT department. I informed him that we completed all his updates and increased the amount of RAM from 8 gigabytes to 16 gigabytes. He asked, "What's that?" I replied, "RAM, memory." He looked at me confused and asked, "Do you mean the C drive?" I then inquired about his department and he told me he was the new IT analyst. I handed him his laptop and wished him a nice day. Story 33. I'll give you a throwback. I was a work-study student in the college computer lab. The year was 1996. Mixed in with the regular undergraduates, we had a handful of non-traditional students. Older individuals who were back in school after careers or raising children. There was one lady who seemed older to me at the time. She might have been anywhere between 45 and 60. It was a small school and I knew all the regulars in the lab pretty well. One day, while I was working on a machine, dealing with corrupted registry keys in Windows 3.1, or something like that, I noticed this lady had Excel open and was busy with her handheld calculator. I edged closer and saw she was multiplying columns together on her calculator and manually inserting the results into another column. This was beyond my mandate, but I stopped her and said, "Hey, let me show you something." When I deleted her column of results, I thought she was going to be upset. For minutes later, when I showed her how to use the formula, click and drag down through the column, I thought she was going to be very grateful. I swear, this lady grabbed my arm and yelled, "Computers are our friends." Story 34. Long ago, a Best Buy employee told me that when his town store first opened, an elderly lady came into the computer section, picked up the computer mouse, and tried to move it across the computer monitor, asking, "Is this how you do this?" Story 35. I sold a computer monitor to two ladies because they liked the screensaver. Their church had sent them to buy a computer, but they couldn't be persuaded to buy the central processing unit. Countless people with gastrointestinal issues causing them discomfort. People double-clicking by banging the mouse against the screen. Talking someone down from pouring half a cup of melted butter into his removable disk drive because the disk was stuck. A service call involving a surge protector plugged into itself. A business owner who only knew how to access his files by going to the recently used files section. His business came to a stop because his niece used his computer for her college report one weekend. People who wanted to buy a television, computer, had no clue what it was or what it was for. They just knew they wanted one. Individuals who deleted the Windows directory because they didn't create it or took it upon themselves to reorganize files, placing all dynamic link libraries in one folder and all executable files in another. Story 36. About 2 years ago, my mom got a laptop again after refusing to use one for about a decade. I lost brain cells being her tech support. A couple of times she called me for help logging in when the device was literally telling her exactly what to do. Another time she asked me to log her out of her Google account, not the whole laptop, please, a reasonable enough request if it hadn't been a Chromebook, where everything goes through your Google account. I tried to explain that to her, and she said, "I don't care for your theories. Just tell me what buttons to press." Mother, that's what I'm trying to explain to you. There are no buttons. Story 37. A couple of my coworkers use my laptop to clock in when we're at work. Each of them could lose 9 fingers and they wouldn't type any slower. To clock in, all you have to do is type your username, which at my shop is 12 first name last initial, followed by your password, which for both of these coworkers is password 1 in all caps. They have been using my laptop to clock in for nearly a year now. One of them can use the time clock in less than 2 minutes. The other one's current record time for clocking in, start to finish, is 4 minutes. His username is 10 characters long, so all told it's 19 keystrokes and 3 clicks to clock in. 4 minutes is his record. Granted, he is from the baby boomer generation, but computers have been common for more than 30 years now, and the layout of the keyboard hasn't changed much since the early 1870s when the QWERTY layout was created. Story 38. Around 2016, I watched my brother, who is in his 30s, opened the Safari browser. He clicked in the search bar to type www.yahoo.com and pressed enter. Then, he clicked in the search bar on Yahoo's homepage to type Google. Story 39. I used to do customer support for a major antivirus company, where most of the client base was seniors aged 65 and above, and I have many horror stories. Most issues stemmed from generic computer illiteracy, such as asking clients to open a browser and type in an address, followed by total helpless confusion. Some clients entered the chat instead of using phone support, relying on the hunt and peck method of typing and struggling to follow written instructions longer than 5 words. These cases stood out to me. 1. An elderly man called to say he had gotten a new Mac but couldn't install our software. He needed a lot of help just to download and open the installation file, which took about half an hour. When we finally opened it, the message displayed indicated that his operating system was outdated. I asked him if he didn't say the computer was new. It turned out he had bought it 10 years ago and kept it unopened in his shed. A man was adamant that he had been hacked. After some back and forth, he revealed that he thought this because a pop-up in his own language was asking him to upgrade or uninstall the software for an HP DeskJet printer. He admitted to having had one in the past and to having installed the software. But that was 6 years ago, and I've had several printers since then. How do they know I used to have one? He had never uninstalled the software. He ended the call saying I was of no help. An elderly couple called for assistance installing the antivirus on their new computer. I also had to help them connect it to their Wi-Fi. After extensive hand-holding, we reached the point where they needed to input the Wi-Fi password. I told them it was on the back of their router, but they did not know what a router was. I tried using terms like internet box and modem and asked them which supplier they had, explaining that their internet came through the device their supplier sent them, but had no luck. 45 minutes into the conversation, I asked them where they thought they received their internet. From a hole in the wall, they replied. I asked if there was a wire running from it. Yes, there was. I asked them to follow it and see where it led. Oh, the internet box. Why didn't you say so? I was trying to help a woman download the installation file. I asked her to open her internet browser and type in the address, but she didn't know where or how to do that. This was a common issue, so I tried the usual solutions, including a keyboard shortcut to focus on the address bar. She insisted it did not work. I attempted to explain where it was and what it looked like, but she couldn't find it. She grew increasingly frustrated every time I asked if she was sure she had opened her browser. 15 minutes into the call, I asked her to describe what she saw. She described her desktop. I informed her that she was not in an internet browser, to which she replied, I logged onto the Wi-Fi 15 minutes ago. Just like you said, throughout my year at that company, I developed a deep frustration with the societal forces that lead so many elderly individuals to feel such helplessness. Story 40. All of Germany. One company I work with understands that our system requires sending finalized PDFs of their documents before they are included in a publication, and that comments should be added and returned. Different stakeholders should comment in different colors if they cannot figure out how to note otherwise. This company prints the PDFs, which are large documents, sends them around their department for individual handwritten comments in various colors, scans the document, and sends it to their foreign offices for further editing. This process is repeated, and they send us a final scanned copy, all in black and white. Number 1990s era homework packet image quality can rival it. Story 41. I was doing the onboarding orientation for a medical job about 8 years ago, and an older lady kept trying to use the computer like a tablet. She couldn't figure out why the monitor wasn't a touchscreen. She had no idea what the mouse and keyboard were for. Someone had to show her. She must have been hired for environmental services or nutrition. Story 42. At my work, computers are all called modems, and at least one person has been submitting requests every week for assistance with various user errors. There are so many requests that it is often difficult to determine if he has any other types of issues. He always claims there is a problem with his laptop. Additionally, security fobs for entering and exiting the building are referred to as phobies in requests. Story 43. I don't know if this counts, but my mom had trouble learning at first. I was a child in the early 2000s, and I helped her use our computer and then walked away. As soon as I started to leave, she panicked and yelled my name. I ran over, thinking the computer was about to malfunction. She pointed at the screen, panicked, and said, "The thingy! The thingy, it changed." It took me a moment to realize the little arrow had turned into an hourglass. I said, "That's okay, Mom. It just means something is loading, and you need to wait." Still in a panic, she dramatically asked, "For how long?" Story 44. I am a teacher, and a few years ago, one of my coworkers had no understanding of the difference between a desktop and an internet browser. She only ever maximized Google Chrome and did not understand what other programs were or what a desktop with icons was. This was around 2017, and she was in her mid-30s, so I don't think she was only familiar with Chromebooks. I also spent an entire year showing a coworker how to attach a PDF to an email on a weekly basis. Every week. She was so thankful I showed her because she said, "I never learned this before." It eventually became so concerning that I brought it to administration because I was worried about her mental capacity. They concluded she was just lazy. 3 years later, I am working with her again and showing her how to attach a PDF to an email. She responded again with, "Thank you. I've never learned this before." Story 45. I am studying for an information technology education. Some students in my class are unbelievable. We are supposed to learn a lot of material, such as Python programming using virtual machines and setting up networks. However, many students rely almost entirely on ChatGPT to do the work for them. They are not learning at all. Story 46. Do you remember floppy disks? I once saw a grown man using a rubber pencil eraser to erase the files on his disk. On a separate occasion, during the dial-up modem era of the internet, I saw a father yelling at his child for dialing the home access number while on vacation in Hawaii. They received a $3,200 phone bill at checkout because he had been playing Dungeons and Dragons with friends all night. I also witnessed a secretary using correction fluid on a printout. Story 47. In 2000, I worked for a student accommodation company in Ireland. A nice lady ran the place and had a computer in her office. I once observed her typing a letter from scratch, printing it, and then turning off the computer without saving the document. I talked with her about it for a bit, and she was unaware that she could save documents on the computer. So, I set up a basic folder structure for her and showed her how to use it to save sent letters and templates. She picked it up quickly and was genuinely pleased with herself. Story 48. There is a new employee at work who has admitted to never wanting anything to do with computers. Unfortunately for him, he is now working in a data center where we use computers all day. He does not know how to send an email, does not know how to add a contact to his phone, cannot figure out how to change his password, and was completely confused when we said to open Google Chrome. There are so many small things that it is astonishing. Story 49. I worked at Geek Squad for a while. A customer brought in an external power supply for an all-in-one computer to be checked for viruses. Some individual damaged the graphics processing unit by removing it with the cover on the PCIe connector, exposing all the lanes and ruining the motherboard. Another customer impressively forced DDR3 RAM into a DDR4 slot, causing the stick to bow and bend. I have received 3 separate calls over 6 years from new laptop owners complaining that they can't open their devices and asking if they should cut the hinges keeping them shut. I have since been pursuing a degree in computer science and moving as far away from consumer IT as possible. Story 50. I was providing remote support for a factory when I received a call from the plant manager. He was trying to give a tour but was unable to log into the system. It turned out he was entering his username and password, but was not pressing OK. He called me for assistance on how to log in while he had an audience. Story 51. I used to provide technical support over the phone. I once asked a lady if she knew what version of Windows she was using. She went on at least a 3-minute tirade about how she didn't find my question funny, stating, "There's nothing wrong with my house Windows. I'm calling about my computer." She demanded to speak to my supervisor because she thought I was wasting her time and wasn't trying to help her. This all happened less than 10 minutes into the call. I tried explaining what Windows was to her, but I couldn't get a word in without being interrupted. Story 52. I used to work at the front desk of a defense contractor. One of the employees was a wonderful old man who was quite a character. He had stormed the beaches at Normandy and carried one of Patton's helmets in his car trunk. Every morning, he would walk into his office, sit down at his computer, and yell, "Help! My computer's broken." I would walk in and turn his monitor back on. I even put a note with an arrow pointing to the monitor power button that said, "Press this if your computer won't turn on." But still, every morning, it was the same. I kind of loved it, though. He would tell me I was a computer genius every time I fixed it for him. When he left the company, I had to clean up his computer, and it was covered in chocolate. When I cleaned out his desk, all of his drawers were full of Mr. Goodbars. I miss him. Also, my runner-up story was about the office manager at the same company. She called a security meeting because she wanted to know if hackers could hack into the projector remote and steal all the government secrets from the projector. Story 53. My work went fully digital last year. We no longer accept paper submissions. We anticipated calls for help navigating the system, but we didn't expect the types of inquiries we received. I was directing someone to the relevant section of the website. I said, "Okay, scroll down and click the link at the bottom." He responded, "Whoa, slow down. I don't understand all this technical jargon." I wasn't sure how to simplify it further. Story 54. My stepdad, 75 years old, has always been firmly against technology. He is so opposed to it that he used to get upset if we used a solar calculator. Now, he is a brilliant man and very kind. He was a mason, so his profession didn't require technology. He can do advanced math in his head. However, he will use technology to his convenience. He uses an automated teller machine and a flip phone because he is busy and found that he was missing out on additional fun activities because he missed calls, and he refuses to use voicemail. He dislikes voicemail and believes that you should always answer the phone. So, his cell phone rings constantly, and he stops everything to answer at any time. Now that I have painted a picture of his absolute resistance to anything related to technology, onto the story. At Christmas 2 years ago, we were all talking about data breaches, scams, and banking issues. My stepdad proudly asserted to everyone how he is impervious to any banking scam or fraud because none of his business, let alone anything related to his money, is on the internet. For the first time in my life, I left him speechless. I said, "Just because you don't put your information on the internet doesn't mean the bank doesn't put your information on the internet. Every time you use an automated teller machine or any basic banking service, it all happens over the internet. But you would have no clue if your accounts got completely emptied out until your monthly bill arrived in the mail." He literally stared with his mouth dropped open and just blinked. Meanwhile, the rest of the family piled on about his misbelief. Story 55. Not knowing the basics like shortcuts for copying and pasting, saving a file, deleting it, and similar tasks can be challenging. Story 56. I remember a time when only enthusiasts had computers, and then the internet emerged, prompting people to buy computers from large retail stores. I was the person everyone turned to for help in setting things up, and I distinctly recall when many individuals needed to be taught how to use a computer mouse. It took practice to accurately position the pointer on a button without overshooting it. So, yes, not knowing how to use a mouse was quite common. Story 57. I had a coworker who double-clicked every button, and if there was the slightest pause in the computer's response, she would double-click again and wonder why the application would crash or the PC would freeze. Story 58. Working a retail job with a rewards program, an older couple approached the counter. I asked for their loyalty card, and the man replied that he didn't have it with him. "No problem," I said, "I can look it up for you." "What's your name?" He scoffed and said, "I thought you said your computer could do it?" I explained that it could, but I needed his name to find his account. He laughed and remarked, "So your computer is useless unless a person gives it the answer." His wife chuckled and nudged him, saying, "Looks like maybe these computers aren't as smart as everyone thinks. How did they think it worked? Did they expect the computer to recognize them as they walked up to the counter?" Story 59. My mother, growing up, often lost track of the mouse's position and became frustrated by the simplest things. If any variable appeared, she wouldn't know what to do. I must have shown her how to check her email countless times and even created shortcuts, but issues like loading times would trigger her to click repeatedly, and she didn't understand the limitations of a processor. The closest thing she had for regular experience during her youth was probably a typewriter, so I can't blame her. However, it didn't stop me from rolling my eyes every time I heard her call my name in that tone. It certainly didn't help that we were working with Windows 95 and 98 at the time, which was a far cry in terms of accessibility. Windows XP, though, was a pretty good operating system for its time. Story 60. My grandmother took a basic computer class. On the first day, they learned how to turn on computers. She still couldn't figure out how to turn on my grandfather's computer. Story 61. That one day in the late 1990s or early 2000s, my parents asked me about Hotmail, thinking it had something to do with inappropriate content. Story 62. A 65-year-old coworker of mine worked the same receptionist job for over 20 years. We had a site-wide internet outage, and she was convinced it was because some cables at her desk had been unplugged. This is wireless. It just needs to be plugged back in, she insisted. Story 63. A database professor from Pakistan insisted that if you had more than 8 processes in Task Manager on Windows 9X, you were hacked. He also made some disparaging remarks about September 11th, 1 year after the event. He was removed shortly after that. Story 64. My college professor wanted to show us a video, so he went to the search bar and typed Google. Then, in the list of results, he clicked the first link, which was a sponsored ad. An installation window popped up, and he said, "Oh, that's the problem. Google is not installed on this computer." This was the computer science professor for programming fundamentals, e-commerce, and database management. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.